Hello and welcome to Infinity. I'm Charlie Seraphin. For the next half hour, we're going to be talking about creativity in business. Our guest is Michael Ray, professor of marketing and communication at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business. He teaches an extraordinary course called Creativity in Business. And it's out of that course material that he and his teaching partner, Rochelle Myers, wrote a book also called Creativity in Business. I think we know what business is, but I'm not sure we know what creativity is. Could you define creativity?
Well, we define it in a little different way, I think, than you normally hear. Normally, what you hear about creativity is that it's a novel approach to a situation, to an appropriate but novel approach to a situation. We tend to think of it as making your life a work of art, and we tend to talk about making business an art form. I remember in Studs Terkel's book, Working, he talked to a waitress. And the wonderful thing about this woman is that she made her work into an art form. She thought of herself as kind of a dancer, moving from table to table and acting appropriately in each situation and so on. And that's really what we're talking about in terms of creativity in business.
Is it just a state of mind? For example, the stone cutter, the two stone cutters on the line, one of them, you ask them what he's doing, he says he's cutting stone. You ask the other one, and they say, I'm making a rotunda for a huge building.
That's right.
They're both pounding on the same piece of rock.
Yeah, I think it is a state of mind. It's an approach to life. It's a way of dealing with all kinds of situations with a great deal of grace and making it like an art form.
What about I'm certain that there are people within the business community, when that's a pretty large area, that would say, business is really nuts and bolts. Forget about all this hocus pocus stuff about art forms and everything else. It's not an art form. It's making money. It's business. Business is business is business. A rose is a rose. Do you deal in the coursework or in the book itself with that resistance, or is the resistance fading in today's world?
Well, I think it's really fading among those people who are really successful in business. And we've had in our course over 6 dozen speakers, and a lot of them are fairly well known. They've been very successful in business. People like Steve Jobs, who started Apple Computer, and Nolan Bushnell, and Charles Schwab, the discount broker, and a number of people, some of them not as well known, but all of them indicate that the way they became successful was by being artful. They may not say that it's artful, but a lot of them do. Robert Marcus, the head of Alumax, said that business is my art. And Wayne Van Dyke, who started Wind Farms Limited, said that business is really the highest art form. And the reason that he said that is that he said that you deal with these dynamic parts, money and people and ideas and markets and all those things, and to put them together as opposed to dealing with something on a canvas that stays still is really, it gives you a tremendous charge. There's a tremendous amount of energy in that. And that is an art form. And you are dealing with the nuts and bolts. You can be creative in every aspect of what you do in business and life. But in doing that, you really are creative. And, we sort of challenged Wayne Van Dyke on that issue of saying that business is the highest art form. And you look at the classic artists and so on, such as Da Vinci and Michelangelo and Picasso and Beethoven and all those fields, and you ask, what is it that makes them such classic artists? And it seems that what they do is, instead of reacting to a problem, they create their own problem. They create their own path. They create their own issue to deal with. And when each individual deals with business or their own lives, that's really the key thing that they do that's creative. They begin to have a vision not only for their business but for their own lives, so that all these little nuts and bolts things they do within that become very artistic in a sense, because it all fits within that vision of what they're doing.
I think we can see the application for someone who is going to start up a new business and has a great idea and approaches it, since nobody's ever done this before. He's forging his own path and makes it work, and that's creative and that's artistic. What about someone who goes to work for one of the largest corporations in America and gets a middle level or a management job or any other job in the chain of command? There are people who are working with him, people who are working under him, people who are working above him, and he's got it's very routine. How can you bring the creativity in business to a kind of a landlocked situation like that?
Well, it seems to us that that one of the reasons that, say, the Japanese have done so well in competing in world markets and so on is that they are creative in the sense of being creative in all those little jobs, and they've actually taken some of our people's ideas, such as quality circles and so on, the idea of people on the production line getting together to talk about what can be done better in that situation. So it's even people who are on a production line can do this sort of thing, can have a life like this, can be making a contribution every day, every hour, in a creative way, even in the structure of a corporation.
Does creativity in business require more effort from the individual? Some people suggest that they go to work in the morning, punch out in the afternoon, and collect their paycheck every Friday, and that's what work is, and then their real life or their real love or their real art form is something somewhere else other than that, with their family or their hobbies or other activities or whatever.
Well, you use the word love, and I think that's really a very important word to relate to this, because what we're talking about and what we do in our course and so on is the issue of really loving what you do every moment, of doing something that you're being paid to do, but you would secretly pay somebody else to be able to do it. And that's another way of looking at creativity in business is it's like being in the early stages of a love affair, where everything in your life is just made so much better. People that you normally would have conflicts with, you don't have conflicts with anymore during that period, and so on. We suggest a number of little, we call them live-withs or heuristics for people to live with, and we do this both in the course and the book. And one of the live-withs we have is do only what is easy, effortless, and enjoyable. And usually, by the way, that assignment, we ask the students to live with that for a week. Usually comes up around midterm time, and everybody starts groaning and says, how can I possibly do only what is easy, effortless, and enjoyable? I have all these papers, all these midterms, and everything else. But if you discover what is really right for you, and if you have a job, you can see even in a job that is within a large corporation, tremendous opportunities to do what's easy, effortless, and enjoyable. Somebody once said that the test of a vocation is a love of the drudgery it involves. And I'm sure in your job, on the surface, it looks like a very exciting job and so on, but there are a lot of things that are really drudgery about it. But you don't tend to see those as drudgery, or at least it's something that you can do about it, that I would see as drudgery. But you don't see it as drudgery because you're doing what in fact is easy, effortless, and enjoyable for you, what you're meant to be is. And that's part of what being creative in business is all about.
Is it necessary to subjugate your individuality in order to accomplish this, especially within a team setting, in order to work with other people effectively, not have the little blow-ups? You have to make compromises. Is there an art to compromise, or is it something that you have to set your mind in a certain frame that I'm absolutely not going to have a conflict, and even though I really feel this strongly inside, I can't let that out because I know that's counterproductive? Where does the individual come into play in this creative process?
Well, we talk about the creative resource that everyone has in terms of essence, and we say that essence has 5 qualities, probably has more than that, but 5 qualities that we can identify are intuition, will, joy, strength, and compassion. And our assumption and our experience has been, not only with our speakers and with our students, has been that people who get in touch with that essence have a heightened ability to understand other people's positions as well as their own, and they have a sense of connection with other people. And one of the things that prevents people from using that essence, from using their own creativity, is what we call the voice of judgment. And we all have from childhood this chattering of the mind, this blame and criticism, this voice that's saying, you can't do that, you're no good. In fact, one of the things that we've found is that people get ideas that that might even be good ideas, but don't even fully come to their own conscious awareness, because this inner voice is telling us, no, don't do that, you'll make a mistake, and so on. And if you can quiet that voice of judgment, you're better able to work with other people, because most people say there's all this criticism, there's all this blame and so on in a corporation, in an office setting, that people are saying you're doing something wrong, that all I ever hear about here is what I do wrong. Whenever I do anything right, my boss gets the credit, on and on and on. And really what that is the power of our own inner voice of judgment. Because if we didn't have the inner voice of judgment saying these things about us, then the outer voices that we hear from other people wouldn't have so much credibility to us. And so by working on bringing out this essence, by working on putting down the voice of judgment that's been around for a long time, this inner voice of blame and criticism, it makes all of our relationships and communication much more smooth within a group.
Is the voice of essence, and you didn't exactly put it that way, is that the voice of God? Another way
you
of
could
saying
look at it in that way. We don't use it in that sense, but it really is this notion. You could say creativity is God. I mean, who is the greatest creator in that sense is God, and so you could say it in that way. But the notion is that we have that everyone has that voice, has those abilities, and it's not just intuition. And in fact, compassion is the most important aspect of that. And it's nice to think of a compassionate God.
You talked about kind of a two-step process. One is heightened awareness of the essence and of that inner voice and those positive things, and a de-emphasis and a quieting of the judgmental voice, which we all tend to carry around with us. How do you go about accomplishing? Is that one step that accomplishes both, or are there two separate approaches?
Well, everybody has their own way of doing it, and we offer a number of tools that people can use to accomplish what you've just said. One is to have faith in your own creativity. Have faith that you are creative and you have this ability, even though it's covered over by the voice of judgment and so on. Second thing is to destroy judgment and create curiosity, to have an absence of judgment in your life. And one way of doing that is just to have strong experiences of your own creativity and to have this curiosity sort of bubble up, so it kind of pushes the judgment aside. You know, that's really what happens in the really hot love affair. You know, you don't have the voice of judgment going at all. You get to the point where you're really beyond that, and it's just your own inner creativity. Another thing is to do precise observation, to see things precisely, almost as a child sees things, or as we see them when we're on a vacation, when we're in a mountain range and we see the morning sun come up over a mountain range or something like that. We really notice those things. But if we could apply that almost scientific observation to our own lives, to everything that's going on, to notice even our own creative acts, then the voice of judgment gets weaker and weaker. And another one is penetrating questions. And we have a heuristic or live with, which is ask dumb questions. And penetrating questions are really the way that people create things. It's somebody asking a question that nobody's ever asked before. That's it. And you know, the root of question is quest, and it's kind of like each one of us is like a medieval knight going out on a quest in life. And so those are ways that you can get at the voice of judgment. There are specific ways that we suggest. One way is just pay attention to it, and it doesn't hold up very well under scrutiny. And once you pay attention to it, you find out how often it comes up in your life, how often we have this voice of blame and criticism. And once you identify it and notice it, one of the things to do is to just shout at it and just get really angry with it and say, "Get the hell out of my life," you know. And you don't have to do that in a crowded room, but just say it to yourself.
What's with him?
That's right. What's with him? But if you do that, you begin to see that it decreases more and more. If you could do that over, say, a 3-week period, you could really almost quiet it completely, which is quite an amazing thing. You know, they say that people use perhaps 1/20th of their total potential, and if you could just quiet this voice of judgment a little bit, you could easily double the extent to which you manifest your real potential in life.
As we sit here quietly in our homes and in our cars and we listen to the discussion, everything seems very clear and it's very logical, and someone listening to us right now is saying, "Yep, that's exactly it, and that's the approach that I'm going to take." But when you walk into the office on Monday morning and the paper from the weekend has piled up and there is a personnel dispute and someone from the home office calls with an emergency project that just got dumped on your lap that should have gone to the department down the hall a ways, and the pressures mount and the confusion and the reality sets in, it's very difficult to reach back inside and get a hold of those things. It's difficult to distinguish the judgmental voice from the essence and the positive approach of what you want to do from the reality of the situation. It seems much easier, speaking from personal experience, to slip back into the same old habits and just trudge your way through another day at the office, maybe go home and after unwinding a little bit say, "I should have handled that better." How in the heat of the battle do you suggest that business people call on this creativity to address crisis situations?
Well, one of the things that's important, we had a Buddhist monk in our class at one point, and he's actually quoted in the book, Lama Sogyal Rinpoche. And somebody asked him a similar question, and he said, it's for that reason, for that type of situation, that I've been using the word called practice. And what we're talking about here is not something that you bring to bear when you have a problem. You can sit around and think about it and come up with an idea. But we're talking about something that you practice during your whole life. And so if you have done whatever practices you develop out of, if you had taken our course or out of the book or whatever, you continue to do them, you begin to develop a faith in your own creativity. You begin to really have an absence of judgment. You begin to really observe precisely and ask the right questions. And studies of top managers have shown that they move from one thing to another. They may spend 5 minutes on an issue that's a multi-million-dollar decision, and they go from that one, they go to another one that's a personnel issue, they go to another one about buying a company. They just move from one issue to another issue, and they seem to do very well in making these decisions. And so when we're faced with that kind of turmoil, it's at that point that you get the benefit of the practice, that you know that you're capable of dealing with all of this, and that you immediately kick in to dealing with it instead of striving to try and do what the right thing is or whatever. You automatically do the right thing because you understand that you don't have the voice of judgment telling you, "Oh God, this is awful. You can't possibly do this. You never did one of these things in a whole day before, and now you have 5 of them on your desk, and look at these terrible people who are trying to do such and such to you," and so on. Instead, you just go at it. And one of the things that comes from most of our speakers is that they tend to do exactly what's in front of them to do. They're totally absorbed in the moment. That's another indicator of what creativity in business is. They're totally absorbed in whatever they're doing. It's this kind of thing that some people call flow, where the building could be burning down and you still keep working on whatever you're doing. And it's a wonderful feeling to have that kind of situation. And so when you get all of this hassle and chaos and so on going on, you get down to business. You get down to doing what needs to be done in front of you instead of sitting there and saying, God, I've got all this hassle and so on. So it really is the practice that goes on over a long period of time. It is possible to take, if you do these kinds of practices and so on, it is possible to just collect your thoughts and just sort of sit there and take 30 seconds or 15 seconds or a minute to just be very calm and peaceful and relaxed. And it's amazing, if you've done these things over a long period of time, how just that moment can get you centered, and you can get to work on the first thing you have to do, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing.
If we talk about people in business being on the fast track, the achievers, is it commonly true that they take a number of these pit stops at regular intervals through their workday, a pit stop being a 30-second, a 60-second, a 3 or 5 minute break for some relaxation technique, meditation, just quiet thought?
They seem to. It's one of the things is that everybody has their own way of doing this. Some people, their pit stop, so to speak, is taking a shower in the morning. Some people do gardening. Some people have to go to the beach. Some people ride on horseback. I read an article the other day that the way President Reagan gets his ideas is while he's on horseback. That's his method. One of our speakers, Jim Benham, who founded one of the first money market funds, in fact probably the first, plays trumpet. He has a jazz band called Full Faith and Credit, and he spends about 5 improvising sessions a week. He closes the blinds, this room he has, and he plays the trumpet, and he does that. And so those are practices that kind of lead to that. There are other people who feel that it's in the heat of battle that they get their best ideas, that it's the pressure that gets them to that point. In fact, I really feel that's true. I think that it's neither the situation where there's too much pressure or the situation where there's too little pressure that produces really creative responses in this kind of flowing situation, but it's the medium amount of pressure. And of course that's all in our minds. And it's the way we perceive it. Any two people can have completely different perceptions of what a situation is. One can see it as being very stressful, and the other one not. And so when we're in those situations, some people will take that little break in the heat of the battle. I mean, they don't even walk away. Some people actually do walk away. I've talked to stock traders who say they actually, when they're in a real heavy situation, they'll take a minute and they'll go off and meditate for a little while. But other people, it's just in the heat of the battle is the best time for them. And in fact, to me, a really bad meeting is one in which there's absolutely no conflict. You know, when everybody just comes in and they say, this is the idea, and they say, oh, that's great, and everybody walks away. One of our speakers, Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, was talking about how you could always tell where a Nike off-site meeting was if you walked down the hallways of a hotel or wherever it was, and you listened for shouting and people bouncing off the walls. And that's the kind of thing that really works. It's that generation of that kind of energy. And of course, that's a situation where everybody in the room feels creative, feels confident in their own creativity, and they respect everybody else there. So they can say things about them that they couldn't say in a situation where they didn't have that. Nolan Bushnell talked about how they would go off to Pajaro Dunes in the early days of Atari and so on, and they'd get this group of people together, and people would say, oh, Bushnell, stupid, again, your idea's at the bottom of the list, and they'd actually attack each other. And so that's a situation where other people who aren't in that creative state would say, well, this is really bad. This is not this is stressful, and everybody's shouting at each other and everything else, but it's really a very high level of creativity that comes from all those individuals expressing their own creativity, and also having the compassion and understanding and confidence and respect for everybody else in terms of their creativity.
I've been toying with a new technique personally, and I'll share it with you, and you tell me whether this has any application. It probably doesn't. It's off the mark, perhaps. Dumb statement. Um, I used to be in a situation where I felt stressed because as I tried to get away from work and as I tried to have quiet time to relax, I was constantly disappointed with myself that work ideas popped into my head. So I've turned the situation around and made it a kind of a game to always try to be thinking about the work, and then I catch myself with long periods of time when I can say, you haven't been thinking about it for X number of minutes or hours or perhaps even days in a vacation period. And that's very refreshing to get that break. But it's just a difference of attitude, and there seems to be less frustration with it.
That's neat. It's we have one of our heuristics or live withs, title of one of our chapters is "If at first you don't succeed, surrender." And what you described is really what we're talking about as surrender. Instead of what you actually surrender is striving, and what you actually surrender to is your own innate creativity. You don't surrender to anybody else, and you don't give up. You keep working. In fact, most people, when they apply this heuristic to their own lives, find they're working harder than ever, but they're enjoying it more. So what you did there was just to surrender to what your mind was doing and kind of let it play out. We have a little technique we do with the voice of judgment, which works very well too, where we really make it look ridiculous. If you have some judgment that's kind of getting in your way, you sort of sit in a meditative way, close your eyes, and you see this, whatever this statement is, in your mind, and then you hear it spoken, and then it gets louder and louder, and this great choruses are singing it, and great orchestras are playing it. It gets the neon lights, and it's flashing, and so on. And when you do that, it just takes a few seconds. The typical reaction is just to start laughing, because it's so ridiculous what happens. So, yeah, I think that's a great way to handle that common problem for all of us. And it also illustrates something that we're really advocating, which is that each person find his own way of doing this. And really all we're trying to do is allow people to have experiences of their creativity so they can begin to play with this. And what happens to a lot of people is that they just assume they're not creative. They assume they can't live up to their total potential. They assume that the situation they're in life is not going to allow them to do this, and they don't begin to play with it. And once you have an experience of it, you begin to play with it, and you begin to do things like that, which that technique in itself is very creative.
Are there companies that suggest the same techniques for all employees? Are there companies that, for example, have at 11:15 in the morning, everyone's going to take 5 minutes and sit down and meditate, or that do those sorts of things successfully? Or is it always seem to work better on a very individual basis?
I think it works best on an individual basis. We've had ever since, I suppose, the turn of the century, the idea of the coffee break, that everybody has a coffee break at 10:15. It's getting so lately that people are taking exercise breaks. Instead of having a heavy lunch, they're going out and running and doing other things. And so I think people are doing these things, but I think it really is true that everybody has to do it in their own ways. For some people, having a cup of coffee with a friend is the best possible thing they could do. Talking baseball or football or something like that is the best way to kind of let their mind rest for a little bit. And it is true that all great ideas, even ideas that help us solve everyday things, comes in a state that is without thinking as we normally think about it.
This is Infinity. Remember to keep your mind open and listen to your heart. I'm Charlie Seraphin. Thank you for listening.